Hello and welcome to the first part of the Arch Linux for Content Creators series. Today we're starting immediately after a successful Arch Linux installation and starting to install some of the packages and dependencies we'll need for future videos. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install and configure some of the important aspects of Arch's default package manager Pacman. I'm going to show you how to install graphics drivers, and I'm going to show you how to install an AUR helper. So if you've already handled all these things during the initial install, then please feel free to skip to the next video in the series. If you haven't done these things yet, then first let me explain how the system is configured. Currently, this system was installed by following the Arch Linux installation guide. It was configured using the UEFI with GPT disk layout example provided in the instructions. My PC itself uses both AMD CPU and GPU, and has not had any GPU drivers installed yet. Finally, for the desktop environment, I've decided to go with installing only the Plasma package. None of the extra KDE applications have been installed, so as you can probably tell, not much has been done yet. If we look over at our menu here, it's not very interesting, is it? I do have OBS. I did install OBS as well. That's for a different part of this video because I need to record the screen later. But for right now, this is all we have. Additionally, I've also created one non-root user named user, as you might have seen when I opened this up. So, as a brief summary, here's what you'll need to have done to follow along in this video. First, you must have completely installed Arch Linux using whatever means you wanted to, whether that be a YouTube video or just going through the installation guide, and you need to be able to boot into Arch Linux without the USB installation disk. Secondly, you need to have at least one non-root user that has been added, and has been added to your sudoers using visudo. If you're not sure how to do that, go ahead and keep looking through the Arch Linux installation guide, as it will show you how to get that set up in the users and management security section. And thirdly, I'm assuming you already have installed the desktop environment of your choice, whether that be KDE Plasma, GNOME, XFCE, whatever your little heart desires. So if you've done more than just these things, that's totally fine, but we may overwrite some packages if they've already been installed. So now that we're all on the same page, let's get started with the post-install configuration. So before we start downloading packages, we need to update some of Pacman's configuration. Pacman doesn't necessarily use the most up-to-date and optimal download mirrors after install. We want to make sure that we're only downloading packages from the closest download mirrors for our best download performance. To do this, we're going to need to download a package called Reflector. Reflector is basically a tool that we're going to use to ensure that we're using only the 10 fastest download mirrors with respect to our location to download our packages. So we can do this in one of two ways. I'm assuming you probably already have some sort of terminal emulator installed. If not, KDE has a package manager called Discover, and that's going to let us install Flatpaks, and that has already been configured. So if we go ahead and open that up, we'll see just kind of our default page for the Discover page, which allows us to install our Flatpaks. I'm going to go up into the search bar and type in console. And you'll see I already have this installed because I did some testing beforehand. You may not have this installed. If you just installed the Plasma package like I did, you might not have this. But in my case, this is already installed. Alternatively, because I like to avoid Flatpaks in general, I like to just download either straight from the Arch package repository or from the AUR. So what you can do is you can use the keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-F whatever. These are going to be called your TTY consoles, and you can access these at any point. They are separate from whatever display manager or desktop environment you're running, so you can access these at any point. It's also good to debug if something's frozen or broken. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click Control. Actually, I'm in a VM, so I'm going to go to up here in the send key, and I'm going to say Control-Alt-F3 because SDDM should have F3 available. So when we do that, we can see this console panel here, and this will let us log in to our account and make any changes we want to do if we need the terminal. So in my case, I'm going to go user, enter in the password that I've got here, and now we can see we're just in a normal terminal. If I do ls to look at the files, we are in our home folder of user. And so now I'm going to go ahead and clear that, and we can install Reflector. So to do that, we're just going to do sudo pacman-s reflector. And we're going to enter our password again. And I already have this installed, but you probably won't. So go ahead and hit yes. Now that we've got this installed, I'm actually also going to install a terminal emulator, so I don't have to do the rest of the video in here. So I'm going to install, I like to use Kitty, but for the sake of this video, most of you are probably going to use console. So I'm going to install that, and I'm going to type in exit to log out of this TTY. And now for SDDM, we can go ahead and go back to our main overlay by doing Control-Alt-F1. That's going to take us back to our GUI. If you use something like LightDM, this is going to be Control-Alt-F7 to go back to your GUI. It just depends on your display manager. So now we've got a console installed, or we've got a terminal installed called console. Let's go ahead and run that. And so this ran the actual Flatpak version, but whatever, doesn't really matter to me. I just need something that works. So now we're going to generate a new mirror list for Pacman, and to do this, we're going to use the following command: sudo reflector latest 10 protocol https sort rate save /etc /pacman.d mirror list. So basically what this command is going to do, it's going to ping a bunch of download mirrors, and we're going to see what the fastest rate for each of those are. We're going to filter out the ones that don't work, and we're going to save the fastest 10 in descending order to this /etc pacman.d mirror list file. So let's go ahead and hit enter there, and it'll start. And so it's going to look like it froze up on you. It is running. There's just not really going to be much output. You'll see probably in just a minute that I'm going to get a couple of warnings for mirrors that are inaccessible to me for whatever reason. Don't panic if that happens. That's totally fine. It's expected. There's going to be at least one. Yeah, here's one just showed up. Failed to rate HTTPS download for wherever. That just means I can't access that server. It tried to access that server and it's not going to save it to the mirror list because it's inaccessible. Now, if you really wanted to look and see what it added, we can go ahead and look at that file. So in this case, I'm going to use a command called cat, which is going to basically print the contents of a file to your terminal window. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out all this, and I'm going to use cat. So this is what that file actually looks like. And so you can see we should have 10 servers in here that are sorted by download speed. I'm in the American Midwest, so this one is probably based out of Dallas or something, maybe Chicago, who knows? I don't know, but this is going to be the fastest server for me, closely followed by a bunch of other servers. That's what our file looks like. Doesn't really matter. We don't have to look at this. It's just in case you were interested in how this works. So let's go ahead and close out of this. All right. Now that we've got that done, we have one last change to make to our Pacman configuration. But to do this, we're also going to need a terminal-based text editor to make the edits. I don't have one installed right now, so I'm going to install Nano. Feel free to use whatever text editor you want, but in our case, I'm going to use Nano because it's one of the most popular and probably one of the easiest to work with out of the box. To do that, I'm going to say sudo pacman-s nano. Oh, I do have Nano installed. I lied to you. I'm very sorry. All right, so now to edit the file in Nano, we're going to also run this command as sudo because we're changing some of the system files. We're going to say sudo nano /etc /pacman.conf. Now this is our Pacman configuration file. Generally, you're not going to really need to edit this probably more than once, but if you want to, you can. As we open up the file, we'll see a bunch of variables, and a bunch of these are going to be commented out. A lot of different programs on Linux are going to use something called a configuration file, which is going to end in .conf. And these files are basically where you're going to change a lot of program-specific settings, and this is where all of your settings will be saved, so the next time you open it, they'll be applied. Now, in configuration files, we use the hashtag to comment an entire line. So anything that has a hashtag in front of it is ignored, basically. It's just text. It's not a command, it's just seen as text. So you see we've got a bunch of different configurations you can change in here, and for the most part, I'm not going to touch these. I am going to change one thing here in the MISC options because I like it. I'm going to enable color, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to color some of the output of your Pacman when you run it. It's really not necessary, and I can show here, I'll show a picture of the comparison here on screen, but to me it makes things look a bit better and a bit more readable. So I'm going to uncomment that line, and then we're also going to scroll down here for the main event, and we'll see here's where our repositories start, and here's some information about what they are. And you'll see by default we have core and extra enabled. Now, what we want to make sure that we enable here is the multi-lib library, because we're going to need those to run basically any sort of 32-bit application. Wine is going to need it. Proton's going to need it. Probably whatever game you want to run later on down the line is going to need it. So we're going to go ahead and enable these now. So to do that, let's go ahead and scroll down to the multi-lib line, and we'll remove the hashtag on the bracketed repository name. And we're also going to remove the comment from the include line below it. You must make sure that you remove the hashtag from the name, or else it will not work. So the hashtag before the brackets needs to be removed, as well as the include, or else it will not work. All right, and that's all we need to do in this file. So to save it in Nano, we're going to say Control O. It's going to ask us what the file name is. We're not changing it. It's the same. So we'll hit enter. All right, so we saved that file. To exit out of Nano, press Control X, and we've exited out. So now we need to tell Pacman to refresh its cache and databases and basically apply all the new changes that we made. So to do that, we're going to go sudo Pacman, and this is going to be a little bit different than what you might be used to, syyU. Now this command is basically going to say, all right, reload all the mirrors, check for new databases, check everything, check for package updates. This is not a command you're going to run often. It's only if you make any changes to mirrors, if you run reflector again, but generally, like if you're going to be updating just packages, you'll do syu. But in our case, because we've changed the mirrors, we're going to use syyU. So go ahead and enter here and you'll see, look at that. So here's the example of the colors. This part's blue, kind of separates everything into nice, easy to read sections. We can also see now we have the multilib here, the multilib library, multilib database here. This was not in here prior to running this. And as we can see, we also have a couple of packages that need to be upgraded as well. So I'm going to go ahead and upgrade those. You're going to have to do this anytime you update your databases. If there's also packages that are updated, you're going to have to update those as well. We've got everything updated. We can go ahead and clear our console with Control L. So now we can start making our Arch Linux install a bit more interesting. But first, we're going to start by doing some more boring stuff, and that is installing graphics drivers. Much like on Windows, installing graphics drivers is necessary to get the best performance and stability out of your graphics card. If you've already got an Arch install up and running with your desktop environment of choice, you may have installed some of the drivers you need already. Now, the installation for these drivers is going to be different based on what type of GPU you have. I'm going to be going over how to install graphics drivers for AMD GPUs, for NVIDIA GPUs, and I'm going to touch on Intel GPUs. So first off, let's start with AMD GPUs. For AMD GPUs, driver installation is pretty easy. Linux has had an open source AMD GPU driver for a very long time, and is in my experience quite a bit more stable than the NVIDIA drivers. Now granted, I haven't used NVIDIA on Linux in a couple of years, but I remember the issues that I had with an NVIDIA card are the reason I use an AMD GPU now on Linux. So if you've got a fairly modern AMD GPU, these commands will work for you. If you have a fairly old AMD GPU, you're like older than 2012-ish, you're going to have to use the Arch guide anyway for AMD GPUs because they use a different set of drivers for the older AMD GPUs. So here's the command we're going to use, and then I'm going to put this on the screen because it's very long, and I'll also remember to put something in the comment section so you can easily copy and paste this. So I've already got this command loaded up in my terminal, so I'm going to press up to recall it. And so this is the command that we're going to be running to install drivers for AMD GPUs. So this command is basically going to install AMD drivers. It's going to install some of the other necessary tools we need to run Vulkan, which was usually going to give us the best performance on Linux. And we're also going to install 2D and 3D hardware acceleration. So let's go ahead and enter here, and you'll see most of these packages I don't have. Some of them I already do. Let's go ahead and hit yes for this. And it's very quick, much faster than running it on Windows, where you have to download a separate installer. You have to wait for the screen to flicker a few times. You got to wait like 5 minutes for everything to install. This is way simpler, in my opinion. Now, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you're going to need a different set of commands that are going to be different based on what type of graphics card you have. So first off, I'm going to show you how to install the drivers for most modern NVIDIA GPUs. This should work if you have basically a GeForce RTX 2000 or newer. It should also work on some of the 1650s and 60s, but you may have to refer to the Arch installation guide for NVIDIA to be sure. Now, the command we're going to run for just the NVIDIA related drivers is the following. Now, this is going to install, obviously, the NVIDIA driver, as well as some of the other utilities you may need to edit the driver later on. So we're going to go ahead and enter. Now, I'm not going to install any of these packages because I do not have an NVIDIA GPU, but this is what it's going to look like for you, most likely. So let's go ahead and say no to this because I don't want to install those, but you should hit yes. Now we need to install some of the Vulkan dependencies. To do this, let's run the following command. Now this command will install the Vulkan dependencies we'll need later to run games. Now Steam will also install these as well, but I like to just install these explicitly so I know exactly when I did this and why I'm doing it. I'm going to run this. You'll see I just installed this on my computer, so it's not going to hurt anything to hit yes again. All right, and finally, if you have an Intel-based GPU, you'll run the following command. Now this command I actually found on a separate guide on how to install Intel graphics. I have not tested this out, and I've never had an Intel GPU to test this on. If you're one of the few people that is going to be using an Intel GPU or integrated graphics for some reason, this is the command you're going to run. But again, refer back to the Arch page on installing Intel drivers if you run into any issues. Now we've got all our drivers installed, we've got our Pacman configured, and I'm going to install a few more packages that may or may not have been installed already. In my case, I find Bluetooth to be very important for using a controller, so I'm going to go ahead and install those just in case they haven't been installed yet. So to install Bluetooth drivers, we're going to do sudo pacman-s. We're going to do blues and blues utils, and these will give you the back end of the Bluetooth functionality. So I'm also going to install a GUI so that I can actually connect to my Bluetooth devices without having to use the terminal. And to do that, I'm going to also install Blueman. This may have been installed already with Plasma, but if not, it's not going to hurt anything to install it again. Looks like it didn't install it. And so we're also going to install a couple of other dependencies that this needs to run. All right, so now we'll see if we go into our applications down here, we can see Bluetooth Manager. That's what we just installed. And we'll see the Blues daemon is not running yet. That's an easy fix. So what we need to do is we need to do sudo systemctl enable -- now Bluetooth. And so that's going to enable the service that runs in the background that manages our Bluetooth. And so now if we go back into Blueman, we should see this running, at least not throwing up an error. Oh, in my case, I don't have a Bluetooth adapter, so this isn't going to work for me just yet, but it will later. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to install an AUR helper. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what the AUR is. The AUR stands for Arch User Repository. One of the main draws of using Arch Linux over other Linux distributions is the Arch User Repository. The Arch User Repository is a repository made by users for users. Basically, anyone can upload to it and install packages from it. As such, there isn't a whole lot of moderation on the packages uploaded there. So at some point, you're going to want to learn how to read package builds and basically vet these packages yourself to make sure they're not doing anything sketchy. But for now, the packages I'm going to tell you to install are safe and reputable. So the AUR can be accessed directly through a browser, and each of its packages can be installed manually without any special tools. However, this is not really the most convenient way of managing these packages. Pacman will not manage packages installed from the AUR, so the user is responsible for updating their own packages. For this reason, AUR helpers were created as an alternative way to manage AUR packages. AUR helpers keep track of your AUR packages, monitor them for updates, and provide the user CLI commands to manage AUR packages without needing to manually clone and update every single package individually. So the AUR helper we're going to be installing today is called Yay, which is short for Yet Another Yogurt. You can go ahead and read into that as to why it's called that if you're interested, but for now, this is what we're going to be installing. There are a couple of other AUR helpers like Haru. You can use Octopi as a sort of GUI interface. There's quite a few that you can use, but Yay is probably the most popular one, so that's what I'm going to install today. So to do this, we're going to have to go to our browser, which we may or may not have yet. Looks like we don't have one yet. Don't worry, we know how to install that. We're going to do sudo pacman-s and whatever browser you want to use. In my case, I'm just going to use Firefox because I really like Firefox. All right, so that should be in our applications now. There it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to visit the GitHub repo for Yay. So this is the Git repository for the AUR helper Yay. What we're going to want to do is scroll down here and we'll see instructions on how to actually get this installed. Now, thankfully, we can just go ahead and copy this section of code. Generally, I would advise against copying code that you don't know what it does, so I'll go over what this is doing right now real quickly. First, this command is going to be installing any packages within these groups that we don't already have installed. Then we're going to use the freshly installed git command to clone this entire repository to our local drive, and it's going to make it in the folder Yay. Then we're going to change directories into that folder, and then we're going to build the package. Now that we know what that's doing, we can confidently copy and paste this into our terminal, Control-Shift-V instead of just Control-V, or you could have just clicked the paste icon up here. Our commands are typed in here, and the way that they're separated, each line is going to run, and then the next line's going to run, and the next line's going to run. So it's not going to run all at once. This output here is just from the sudo pacman-s -- needed line, so we're going to hit yes. These are all the dependencies we're going to need to use Git. And now we're cloning Yay. By default, terminals are going to open up in your home folder, and that's where this is going to be saved. So enter in the password, and now we're going to actually build that file. So we need to go to do that. All right, so now we have yay installed. And so if we do ls to list all the files in our current working directory, we can see we changed to the yay directory. And if we move up a level using cd ... we'll see this little squiggle, which is our home directory. And if we list all the files in there, you can see we've got that yay folder in there. And now we can go ahead and test yay and make sure it's working. So yay. And so right now, because we don't have any AUR packages, it's basically just a pass through for Pacman. Since we know that yay is working, we can go ahead and remove the files that were put on our computer to build it. I'm going to do rm-rf yay because it's in our current working folder. If you want to be a bit more specific, you could say tilde/yay. You could also do home/yay. These are two easy ways to refer to your home directory, so you don't have to type out /home/user every time. I'm just going to do yay because I know we're already in this directory. And if we list again, we can see that yay folder is gone now. All right. So that's basically all that we're going to go over today. This is basically just getting up all the dependencies and the drivers and all of the lower level things that we don't want to worry about later on, getting that set up before we start installing some of the applications that we're actually going to want to use. Hopefully this was helpful. This video specifically is basically just like an extension of the Arch installation guide, but this is just to make sure that we're all on the same page. If you've just followed the Arch installation guide and you didn't really do a lot of digging into the other configurations and general recommendations on how to set up Arch Linux, this is going to cover a decent amount of it. So hopefully you found this video helpful. In the next video, we're going to look at setting up gaming on Arch Linux, and that'll be fun. A lot more fun than what we just did. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully this video was helpful, and I hope you guys have a good day.